Greece is defying the International Monetary Fund and perhaps defaulting on a 1.6 billion euros payment that is due tomorrow. And that makes me wonder, what type of global economic model are we following on the earth? That not only regular folks are defaulting on their debt, students, families, small business, even territories and whole fucking countries are finding themselves unable to pay back their loans. Greece has just called for a referendum allowing their citizens to decide if they want to pay back the Eurozone the monies lent to cover the deficit. And here, closer to home, a US territory, Puerto Rico, has $72 billion of debt that, if defaulted, will make the island pretty much property of Wall Street. This is awful that we see this global trend. Let's talk about Greece first. We'll go back to Puerto Rico. How did Greece got into this mess? First, I think it all started when Greece decided to play in the same leagues that Germany. German currency was really strong when they decided to join. Greek currency was not as strong. So I think Greek pride and German interest came together to put this association forward. Then we have reckless lending by French and German banks, allowing Greece to function like a normal country with the funds of a normal country. But hit the 2008 crisis, they didn't have the solvency, they didn't have the money to keep investing in Greece, forcing Greece to go to the European countries and the European Central Bank, International Monetary Fund, to look for a bailout. They did not got one bailout, they got two bailouts, and now they owe 220 billion euros.
You know, it's frightening, Jose, and you're absolutely right. This situation, it's troubling to see it from the outside. I can only imagine what the people of Greece are feeling, locked out of their own accounts until Monday, but we'll get to that in a second. I understand this 5-year financial crisis that they're under. It's centered around debt, and we saw predatory lending happen in Greece where banks were lending them money. Those banks are responsible for this crisis. They should cut their losses. 2009 and 2010, they were giving Greece money. You know, they should just go ahead and cut those losses, stop forcing it to be repaid back to them. You were right about trying to share the currency with Germany. They weren't strong enough to do that. They should have never been allowed to do it because they're trying to compete now with an economy that they can't compete with. And if they default on their loans, you know, to the IMF, that has very troubling consequences for them. You know, they might no longer be allowed to participate in the Eurozone. They might have, you know, there's no telling what could happen to them.
Yeah, it's a volatile situation, and you make a point. Is the idea that these banks put Greece in this situation, that's one of the arguments that the Greece government is saying, is like this is the responsibility of the Eurozone and the banks, because they argue that the bailout was badly conceived. The bailouts that they received, focusing too much on balancing the budgeting and the economic austerity that the country needed to live in, instead of fixing Greece's unique government and economics. Just a fact, the economics of Greece contracted 25% between 2010 and 2014. This is the span of time where the bailouts were given. So it goes to show that the bailouts were not really good. What is happening right now, Greece has all of their banks closed for the next 6 days. Their citizens can only withdraw 60 euros a day. That's about $66. So it's creating unrest on the civilians. It's unresting to see the people lining up to try to get some money. Some people are not being able to cash their pensions. So it's getting in a pretty gnarly situation.
Jose, it's heart-rending to see these people sitting on the curb in some cases, you know, wringing their hands, not being able to access. Wouldn't you be furious if you couldn't access money that you put into a bank? I mean, that's just sort of a basic way that society functions. Their society is clearly about to stop functioning if they don't fix this issue and fast.
And this weekend they are going to decide on a referendum if they want to repay this debt, the terms of repaying this debt. The response from Europe, Angela Merkel says, well, they are on all the right to have this referendum, although we as the European Union, we are in all of our right to take actions if they default on their payments. The really big issue is that tomorrow they are probably defaulting on a 1.6 billion euro payment to the International Monetary Fund. But also, July 20th, they will, if they don't make a payment, they will be defaulting on a 3.5 billion euro payment. And that's the really scary ones, because the European Central Bank is the one lending emergency funds for the banks of Greece to keep functioning. So if they default on July 20th to that payment, then they are going to freeze the paper money from Greece, and that's going to be really harsh on the population. Mm-hmm. And we've seen in the past that they are not shy of going out and expressing their their protest against this situation. Now, let's talk about Puerto Rico, that is closer to home, and it's dealing with a similar situation. The governor just said that $72 billion of debt most likely won't be able to get repaid.
Well, understanding that debt, though, it's a very unique sort of debt that they're in, and it's similar to what we saw in Detroit, only Detroit was allowed to bankrupt all of their debt. They had these municipal debts where they were taking money out of people's pensions, IRAs, tax-deferred retirement accounts. They should have never been allowed to do that. They were able to bankrupt that debt where they didn't have to repay it, and ordinary working people who'd spent decades putting money away suddenly lost it all. And I'm glad that Puerto Rico can't do that to people. They've been doing the same thing, taking money out of municipal places where they shouldn't have done it, and now they're forced to possibly negotiate with creditors. They have to set it straight. They can't just bankrupt that debt. And if they were allowed to do it, you'd see a lot of people in a serious hardship. So
yeah,
I'm glad they can't.
I mean, it's Puerto Rico's situation is very complex. Is one of the poorest territories of the U.S. Just a fact: each resident of Puerto Rico owes $20,000 from the moment they're born, just because of the debt that the territory has. And this is something that it's very similar to Greece, what is happening in Greece and also in Puerto Rico. 70% of the output, of the economic output of the country goes into repaying this debt. Mm-hmm. So we see depressed economies, we see out-migration, we see loss of workforce. So these depressed economies find themselves even in more hardship to repay these loans. And who is the culprit? Wall Street. Mm-hmm. Speculators that decided that public debt of territories or countries is good business, and then when they decide that it's not good business anymore, they just pull out and they leave the countries to deal, or the territories in case of Puerto Rico, to deal with the consequences.
Well, Wall Street is to blame, Jose, you're right, in certain aspects of that. But what about the government who Puerto Rico, their authority system, where they're allowed to sort of take from places they shouldn't be allowed to take from? There should be some more responsible oversight here, and we're not seeing that.
That's part of the unfair situation that Puerto Rico lives. Unlike Detroit, like you said, that also has a lot of municipal fund that they were able to bankrupt because they are a city. States and territories are not able to bankrupt, so they have to deal with the creditors and figure out a way out. But this situation is really scary to see that around the world we see a global trend where the amount of greed from Wall Street and lenders and banks are putting whole populations at risk. Let us know how you feel about the situation, and please subscribe to the Lib TV 2.